In the socio-emotional domain, we also see a lot of changes in late life. And specifically when it comes to retirement or the gradual withdrawal from full employment, there are many repercussions. One of those is the loss of occupational identity for some people. This does not have to be the case, but for many, especially in a society that emphasizes work and achievement, we may come to identify ourselves with our professions throughout life. I believe that this is changing in modern economies and the digital age, where people have an emphasis on meaning in their work and may hold several different jobs and change careers and make midlife corrections. Regardless, some people come to identify with their professions and they may feel a loss of their identity when that is gone, either by choice or forcibly. Retirement in the United States is voluntary, with a few exceptions, such as cops and pilots who have a mandatory retirement age. And individuals vary in how ready they feel to retire. Most do it when they feel financially secure. However, health reasons may also be a factor. Regardless, there are a few factors that make life after retirement or simply in old age more pleasant, more enjoyable. And one of those factors is our social convoys. These are groups of people who journey with us throughout life and provide support in good and bad times. They have been shown to increase our subjective well-being or life satisfaction, in other words, by really affirming who we are and what we mean to others, because they've always been with us, or at least for a long time. Examples could be college buddies, army buddies, family, etc. Another factor in subjective well-being in old age is volunteering. This has been shown to positively correlate with life satisfaction, mainly because it's a really positive exchange between the elderly and society. It's a win-win situation where communities are enriched by the contributions of the elderly, either in mentoring the young or helping as docents at museums or parks or wherever, whereas the elderly themselves remain active and engaged and socially interacting. Community is also hugely important in late life. Specifically, artistic and religious communities have been shown to significantly increase subjective well-being in late life. Despite these positive factors, we still witness ageism or prejudice and discrimination against the elderly, especially in Western societies, as well as elder abuse. Elder maltreatment can take various forms. By far, the most common is simply neglect, just like with children. But it could also take the form of physical abuse and financial or material exploitation. This is not the case in many Eastern cultures, not to say that it doesn't exist, but many of those cultures place a greater emphasis on value and respect for the elderly. In the West, we tend to value youth and beauty. In the East, the elderly person is respected for having lived a long life and accumulated a lot of knowledge and wisdom that should be passed down to the rest of us. So we see this in terms like Lao Ren. It's a Chinese term, which I'm probably totally butchering in terms of pronunciation, but it essentially refers to a respected elderly person. We see this in holidays that are dedicated to the elderly, the Day of the Aged Person in Japan, for example. We see this concept in the University of the Third Age, where the elderly can remain stimulated and continue their education into late life. So culture plays a big role here, as it does in many other facets of life. Obviously, we could not talk about late life in the socio-emotional domain without talking about Erikson, specifically the eighth and last stage of Erikson's psychosocial theory, which is that of integrity versus despair. That is the conflict of this stage. And according to Erikson, it is the last one after you have hopefully resolved all previous ones, beginning with trust, going into autonomy, initiative, industry, identity, intimacy, generativity, all the way to integrity versus despair. Here, the goal is to view one's life as satisfactory and worth living, and the associated virtue is no less than wisdom. Individuals who achieve integrity accept their past choices, good and bad, and they are at peace with their past and present actions. They have resolved issues. They essentially judge their lives as having been meaningful and worth living. Note that I don't say positive or good only. Meaningful takes in the good and the bad. There may be some regrets, not many. There will probably be many mistakes, but also lessons derived and enrichment experience throughout this life. So there is definitely an element of despair, of maybe regrets or some guilt or resentment or bitterness, but this is hopefully overshadowed by the more positive side of the conflict of integrity. And again, with the goal of acquiring wisdom in old age. The person who has achieved integrity and acquired wisdom is at peace with themselves and others and is ready to accept death, which is the final passage. It is one of the most feared and yet the most natural part of life. The death can be a traumatic life experience, especially if it is sudden, unexpected, or for a living partner. And it generally results in grieving, which is the emotional response of sorrow, anger, confusion, whatever it may be. The expression of this emotional response is what we call mourning, and it is very much shaped by culture and religion specifically. For example, in the part of the world that I'm at, hiring professional mourners is a common thing. They are designated individuals that may perform a eulogy, may cry professionally, and help people through the grieving and mourning process. In many cultures, including Native American, Eastern, Muslim, there is a long-term relationship with ancestors that is valued, and this may not be the case in Western cultures where it may even be seen as pathological, right? Talking to the deceased or maintaining a relationship with them. At the end of life, many issues become relevant. People may want to create a final scenario or make decisions about how they want to depart this earth. Here, medical, financial, and legal issues are very important. For example, medical issues such as specifying a DNR or a do not resuscitate order, where people specify that they do not want CPR or cardiopulmonary resuscitation to be performed on them in case they stop breathing or their heart stops beating. So that's a medical directive. People may also decide how they want their body to be disposed of after they die. They may want to make legal decisions such as advance directives. These are things like living wills, where you specify what you do and do not want done to you. You may give power of attorney to somebody else to make those healthcare decisions in case you may be unable to do so yourself. You may may take care of the distribution of your assets after you pass, like wills and trusts. So there are many decisions to be made in those spheres, but perhaps the most important ones are in the social and emotional domains. At the end of their lives, most people desire to pass comfortably and at peace with themselves and others. So they may want to resolve issues that relate to emotions and how they deal with and accept death, but also in regards to other people, family or friends. Memorial services may constitute also a way for them to exert some control over how others will say goodbye to them once they've passed. Finally, when we talk about death and dying, the right to die is an important issue. Here we're talking about autonomy in the face of death. Do people have the choice to terminate their own lives? We give people the right to choose who they vote for, who they marry, how they work and how they live their lives, but do we as a society give people the right to choose how they depart this earth? As you can imagine, this is a hugely controversial issue, and some significant factors here or concepts are those of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide. Euthanasia, of course, refers to the intentional termination of life by another individual to relieve pain and suffering. It is illegal in the United States in both its passive and active forms. Passive euthanasia is about letting die. It's about removing perhaps hastening somebody's death by the alteration of some support, like say removal of a respirator or withdrawal of food and water, for example. This is in contrast to active euthanasia, where it is an act of killing. Again, mercy killing to relieve pain and suffering by, say, the administration of a lethal dose of a medication. Euthanasia in both its active and passive forms, it contrasts with physician-assisted suicide, where we see the termination of someone's life with the help of somebody else, but in the end, as an individual act. The person is terminating their own lives, hence the term suicide, right? So here, a qualified medical professional can, for example, prescribe a lethal dose of a medication that the individual then takes themselves, or they may provide the information or some other means that will help somebody else terminate their own lives. At this point, I would like you guys to pause the video and reflect. Given what you've learned throughout this entire course and through your life experience, in that very relativistic way of thinking in William Perry's scheme of intellectual development. Through your knowledge and your life experience and what you've learned in this course, at this point, what do you think that will have made your life worthwhile? So at the end of the day, on your deathbed, either it be tomorrow, hopefully not, 5, 10, 50 years from now, what will bring satisfaction to you? What will have made for a life worth living? We have come to the end of the lecture, of the course topics, of life stages, and at this point, I would like you guys to be able to explain physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional changes and their causes in late life, to be able to discuss medical, legal, and socio-cultural aspects of dying, and finally, to, again in a very committed relativistic way, use this knowledge to substantiate your opinions and to benefit your own life. That's it, everybody. Take care.